Here to introduce our next group. The next working group will be focused on aviation survivability and is moderated by CW5 Casey Peterson, Chief, USAACE Survivability Branch. Casey, floor is yours.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Just up front, this is my last official act in uniform, so it's open kimono. So any questions throughout the brief, go ahead and throw that out, and within this venue, I will give you the answer that I'm allowed to give. So I'm primarily coming to you as an AMSO, but I do have all the other qualifications, SP, Master Gunner, EIEIO. I am an Apache pilot, and by no means is that a record. I can't believe they gave me 55 minutes to talk, because we know that Apache pilots love to hear each other talk, right? The record is actually 6 seconds, set in September 9th, 2019. All right, so the theme here is proactive over reactive. And how did we get here from about 18 years ago? So 18 years ago, we really started looking at the track and how we wanted to adjust the responsibilities of the AMSO. So we conducted the first CTL creation. All right, from there, the functional needs analysis was put into effect in 2008, and that is really our foundational document as far as survivability goes. 2011, the ICD was created and signed off, which identified quite a few of the gaps that we work off of now. And again, that is another foundational document for which we conduct all training, all updates to the course, or anything survivability related. So I've been asked over the last couple of years, why are we going off a 2011 document? Well, really, we haven't covered a lot of those gaps from 2011 and 2008. That being said, I know a couple of my predecessors here in the room that did a lot of the groundwork, and we are closing a couple of those gaps as of this year and the last couple of years with a lot of collaborative efforts between the directorates at USAACE, National Guard Bureau, and other agencies that have helped us get to where we're at now. Another big milestone would be in 2015. We produced the first survivability doctrine of the .9, which was directed by Major General Lundy at the time. That really instituted requirements for training within the force. You'd be surprised how many people don't know that we had training requirements for survivability back in 2015. But there it was. As I understand it, all these slides are going to be hung on the Quad A website, so you can go back and review them later if you want to have a reference. All right, so we laid our portfolio out through FY28. Again, these are our hot rocks. Technically, we got about 34 initiatives within the branch right now. We just dropped off one of them last week when the .9 was sent back to APD. Again, the most staff document in DOTD history from 2019 up to, again, last week. All right. All right, so we'll follow the .mil PF format. Any point along the way, if you have any questions, you want to stop, Chris has got the mic up here. Just raise your hand, and he'll bring it up to you. So hot rocks for Doctrine. Again, we looked at our joint services and how do they do fundamentals versus their classified or more advanced Doctrine formatting. And we started to adopt a fundamental unclassified route. And then we already had the .2, which is our classified manual, the only classified aviation doctrine manual we have in the conventional Army. With that, we advised and then we were directed to put together a fundamentals of survivability manual, which will be in the works this year. We're hoping to get input from National Guard and Reserve as well to come to USAACE and help develop that manual along with the academics that are going into the course reconstruction for AMSOC. We're also going to look at a holistic review of the ATM tasks. So if we fly multiple airframes or we have worked with other airframes, we know there's some inconsistencies between our standards and how we do things within our own doctrine, our own ATMs. So collectively, we are going to sit down and look at all of those tasks, make sure our instruction fundamentals, our training methodology is where it should be, and that our tasks are aligned as much as possible across all airframes. We have our CTSSB 5 June, which is running in conjunction with the ATIC. Who here does not know what ATIC yet is after this conference? No? All right, so ATIC is the upgraded IPC. I know the panel coming up next will talk a little bit about that. But we're going to run that CTSSB in conjunction with ATICs so we can best collaborate efforts on critical tasks and make sure we have as little mission creep as possible and make sure that they complement each other. Typically, we only get about 19 surveys for CTSSB. As of this morning, we have gotten 99. So we far exceeded the record. So there is a lot of push from the field as far as what the AMSO's next responsibilities are going to be. So that's a very good sign for us that we're going to see a lot of input for this new evolution in the track. All right, so we've worked very hard to get all the teams together. We have our monthly syncs, we have our quarterly forums. I know NGB has a monthly sync as well that we sit in on. We have our CAB Fuse, which is our CAB AMSO and SPs that get together. We discuss, hey, what went right, what went wrong, what can we do better within the formations, and share information before we disseminate that out to the force. Again, we're trying to limit as much vacuum, as much information within a vacuum, and make sure we have positive and continuous input from the field before we make any changes. For example, the .9, 458 comments in worldwide staffing. Again, we set records in how many people were influencing that piece of doctrine. 3 Yankees. So that's been another big push, is getting 3 Yankees within all our formations. If you understand what 3 Yankees are, they're the space cadre graduates. As we look at multi-domain operations, they bring a lot to the table. All right. Who here has heard of MIST? Or used MIST? All right. So your 3 Yankees are going to get instruction on how to operate those systems and use those within your talks. So we have 2 within our branch right now. The initiative with OPFD, if we get our way, is that you'll have at least 1 in the battalion, your battalion AMSO or above. We're also sending USAACE cadre to MOTS every year. So we want to build upon whatever our sister services have done, put that back into USAACE POI and instruction, and make sure that we take everything that's right from those other services and implement it into Army doctrine and Army training as much as possible. As far as training goes, so AMSOC is going through a full revision along with the creation of ATIC. The big push that we're putting into this new revision is UTE. So the last 4 or 5 years, we've had MOI training for UTs already in the course, but now we're going to make a standardized, based off of the modules that DES have gone out to your individual units and done training for. And I know 10th Mountain, you've made that a requirement for all of your AMSOs, which is a great push forward. They'll get everything they would normally get in those modules. So once they get back to the unit, all they need is their flight and progression training. No different than an IP that's coming from IPC. They're going to go through progression. They're going to get signed off by your senior instructors, and then they go to work as a UTE.
They get phase 1 day in NG and the AMS module, or just the AMS module?
So are they getting the day, the NG, and the AMS module at the AMSOC course, or AMSOC?
So they're just doing the initial prerequisite for the MOI, which is on the blackboard.
All right.
And then they're going to do the AMS module when they're there.
So should they come phase 1 complete for the day in NG?
So ideally, we'd like to see them day complete at least. That is not a prerequisite as of right now, but we're foreseeing that being a prerequisite in the future, maybe FY25.
All right.
All right, classified instruction and all the PMEs. So we touch every single PME that comes through USAACE. And that was been one of the number one initiatives from General Francis back in October of 2020, that we inject classified instruction across the board. VTS, if you sat in on some of the briefings and working groups yesterday, they talked a little bit about VTS. That is our virtual training suite. That is one of the foundational adjustments to how we're going to conduct training across the board. So our CBAT training is going to a VTS system. Who here's used VR? Yeah, all right. So it has a very VR feel to it. It is a standard program on any of your computers. You should be able to go to your desktop on your government computer and see it and pull it up and use it. A future iteration of that system, we expect it to be a completely VR or blended VR system as we transition to more and more VR type training, not only for our operators, but also for our maintainers. All right, so we're all familiar with the JSITS process, right? So we're going to start at the left and work our way to the right. No? Okay. So no fooling, this is actually how they do it. But thankfully we got some congressional funding and we got some additional funding from functions like the QRT where we can kind of jump ahead of some of these processes. So the one we want to highlight, one of our hot rocks, which is this year, is QRT3. We're all familiar with QRT1 and QRT2, where we got the evasive flight maneuvers. That was an awarded test of $1.5 million apiece, which does not go very far in aviation testing, right? So QRT3 is looking at the acoustic modeling of our aircraft, because unfortunately we know more about the threat systems and what they look like on the battlefield than we do our own aircraft. So we're going to get after that in QRT3, put that back into our mission planning systems like IMOM, and actually see what sphere of influence we, transmit on the battlefield. The Joint Aircraft Threat Modeling Simulation Validation, JADAMS V, they just came back from testing last month, 2 weeks ago. We're waiting on that test report to see if that's going to make any adjustments into any of the procedures, any of the ways we want to make any changes into Doctrine. But until we actually see the valid data, I know data is very important when we make changes. We're not going to make any new changes until we get those updates. The Fort Rucker Helicopter Aircraft Survival Equipment Training and Systems, or FRHAES. That is right now our answer to home station training. We know that there's 6 ranges CONUS that you can do expendables, and we are rapidly losing that capability. So we are leaning very heavily on simulation. So unfortunately, we're no longer at Fort Rucker, we're at Fort Novrasel, so it's the FNHAES. We think that name is probably going to change. It was a little bit of an oversight. But if you haven't heard about EABE or FRHAES, we redirected some of that congressional funds and put it back into what EABE was supposed to be, and that is creating the virtual threat environment that not only at a CTC or at Fort Rucker, but one that you can load on your aircraft, fly into that virtual environment with those threats that you've laid down in your mission planning software, and you go against those threats. It's a very quick, very cost-effective method. The hardware is already there, minus a plug-and-play computer, and it's going to allow collective training or individual training at home station be a lot more effective than you trying to look at some tower off in the distance or trying to pretend it's something that's on your screen. All right. It has been tested in the 60 mic simulator. We are pushing forward with the approval from General McCurry to go ahead and pursue the AWR so we can get those in at least Apache, Chinook, and Blackhawk. All right, so the question was, does that require ACE equipment? So it does not. Unbeknownst to us, there was an unused slot within our processor and an unused plug that we can plug in a computer with the appropriate software on the aircraft, and it will basically transmit the data into the glass, because that was one of the requirements we put forth to the contractor. And again, no affiliation with a contractor when I leave the Army, no affiliation with any Army activity when I leave, but the requirement was it has to be in the glass, has to be user-friendly for the operator, and instructors on the fly should be able to make adjustments for their training objectives. So they said, okay, give us some time, we'll come back. 6 months later, they came back and said, we got it, and the tests have been very, very promising. So it does not require the ACE equipment, but the aircraft thinks that it's there because all the information is going through that computer. Has to be a bust aircraft. It'll display on the glass when you maneuver the aircraft. That threat's reacting to the aircraft movement.
Thank you.
Any other questions on FR Hayes?
Yeah, is there a projected timeline on when we might see EA? I know it's got some processing still to do, but...
So I personally think we could see that by the end of the year if we got our AWR funding. So SRC, the company that's taking lead on it right now under Tismo, they put a $7 million price tag on that AWR. So I don't know where the budget's going to allow for that for this fiscal year. So. All right, for our leadership, so we brief every single PME that comes through USAACE, and unfortunately, a lot of our senior leaders, especially at the PCC or SLC level, we show them all of the materials that our AMSOs are being trained on, whether it be IMOM, NGA World, MACE, whatever the case may be, and most of them have never seen that. So they do not know the capabilities that are being installed on our younger AMSOs and mission trainers and AWS, our junior warrants that are coming through the courses now. So again, it comes back to education. So that's why we try to show every single course what the capabilities are, and again, it's just a taste of it. One of the things we want to point out to our leaders in these leadership developments are we always train to succeed. We've never really trained to fail or never really experienced failure. For those of us who have been to Korea and been through the O plan, we always win, right? We always reconstitute. We always go way beyond duty day. We always expend way more ammunition than we should have on hand. So we are unfortunately training our leaders to win in every situation. That is one of our big emphasis in our training development with our AMSOs is make realistic scenarios. Make sure that they are using something within their AOR that their unit wants to get after as far as a training objective, and make sure that it's realistic. So if the scenarios are realistic within the unit and we continue to develop simulations that are realistic, we should be able to be more prepared for a large-scale fight or situation. All right, for our next generation, so our junior aviators that are going through AWS, again, that's been up and running past the pilot program. They're getting a lot of the classified academics that we would have gotten in AMSOC. They're getting mission training on the miltopes. They're getting the NGA crew to come in, the IMOM crew to come in and give them base level mission planning capabilities. So when they come back to the unit as a junior aviator, they already have somewhat experience, so they can go into those mission planning cells at the company, battalion, or above, and be productive planners for your formations. As far as our battalion level AMSOs or trainers, again, we talked about the 3 Yankee identifier within those battalions. Again, recommended for all battalion AMSOs to get that and get that training. Within the .9, will you see that pushed out through APD? There is recommended training that each individual should strive to attain at different levels, whether it be company, battalion, and brigade. So this is another mechanism. You can take it to your commander and go, this will make me better at my job if you allow me to go to this training. All right, some of it's unit funded, some of it's funded by other means. So warrant officer modernization, I do not see him in here, so I won't say any things about him. Just like we have our SP, which again is a senior IP, we're looking at what can we do to self-identify those senior AMSOs within the formation. So during the warrant officer modernization efforts, we are looking to add on another identifier for your senior AMSOs. So the recommendation right now is a November identifier. That's been a big push from our side. As you look at those brigade level AMSOs, we want to make sure that they've had that prerequisite training to be conducting duties at that level. 150 uniforms are also coming through AMSOC through the course, and we're also sending 15 Whiskeys and 15 Charlies in the course right now as a walk-on. Whether or not they get an ASI identifier from being at the course is still under discussion with OPFD. So a shout out to NGB. They got some of the best SIPR cafes that we've seen. They've really gotten ahead of, go ahead.
You mentioned 15 Whiskeys and 15 Charlies. Are you still supporting the 35 series, 35 Deltas, 35 Echoes MI professionals? I'm an aerial intel guy, and I just asked because we have sent several of our 35 series S2s through. We see huge benefits when we do that.
Thank you for that. Yes, no, so we had to slow back a little bit because of COVID, because they significantly shut down how many seats we were allowed to have. But since that's opened back up, we are, again, seats permitted, allowing those folks to come in on a walk-in basis to get the training. They're not getting an identifier or any designation at this time, but we're reducing the backlog, but there is still a backlog right now, about 34-ish, spots. So there is a waiting list for that. We've requested through USAACE headquarters to increase the instructor load to an additional 2 green suiters or a mix thereof of green suiters and DACs to produce a second course and run them concurrently. The funding's just not there at the moment. So, all right. So for facilities, I have Tim Brundage here in the room. I mean, he's made a lot of strides and a lot of efforts to get SIPR connectivity throughout the National Guard, and again, that is one of our biggest limiting factors within the cabs to get access to some of these classified materials to do the education. Along with collective trainers. So I know the CG just signed the requirements for classified collective training capability. So as it goes up through STI and the STI CFT, we should start seeing that as a future requirement within those systems to be capable of going classified. The facilities at USAACE are being upgraded along with the facilities at the CTC for either ABE or classified venues. We need to ensure that all the units that are going to implement some of the classified training simulation products like IMOM or anything else that ties in that data, especially NGA world, which is being taught at the course now. It doesn't do any good if they don't have a SIPR access to go ahead and pull real data. That kind of ties into the policies. So we brief our PCC about this issue every single time, and they're usually the ones that attack the neck when they get back to their units and find a solution. Unfortunately, we're still fighting with AR Cyber to make a standardized across-the-board access requirement. It comes back to minimizing risk versus being completely risk-adverse. So we know that when we're downrange, we have multiple ports, multiple access to classified material right next to our NIPR material, and it's usually not an issue. But Joe is getting after it, and they're taking their miltopes home to do updates, and we're trying to avoid that type of issue as much as possible. So overall, we're moving in the right direction. You'll see when the .9 comes out, we had made quite a bit of concessions because I think we were going at what General Francis was calling Operation Lightspeed, and we told him we couldn't use that because it was already coined by somebody else. We understand that fundamentals has been a big concern the last couple of years. So we have backed off on, with the approval of the command, on some of the requirements as far as will versus should. So you'll see stuff in the .9 like highly recommended or should be trained at a certain level. A lot of that is back on the commanders to make those assessments on whether or not the crew is proficient to progress to a more complicated or advanced capability like night operations, multi-ship operations. There's requirements in there for your trainers to be signed off and certified before they're a tactics trainer. Again, your SPs are kind of not tied to that requirement, but from our position, we recommend that they still go through the training that every other IP, every other UT goes through, so they're proficient before they go out and try to execute any type of AMS training or any type of advanced 2000 series task maneuvers. Again, for any industry in the room, again, I have no affiliation with any of y'all, but if you have something that is going to help the warfighter, that's what we want to see. We don't want to produce stuff just to produce equipment, but we want stuff that actually works. That's why when we revitalized EABE, that we made sure that it was user-friendly, it was in the glass, and it had the same parametrics that you're going to see in the real aircraft in real life. If we can't maintain that standard, we don't want to see it. So if you notice, Chris Crawford is at the top of the list. He is my replacement. He's going to be the first CBA4 survivability branch chief in the aviation branch history. He's the right person for the job, and he's way smarter than I am. What? Thanks for the acknowledgement. Do you have any questions for me or Chris? Sir.
So these aren't questions, these are more statements. So most of you know me as a DOTD guy for Fort Novacil. And I've done a lot of war fighters over my time and still spend a lot of time looking at training events. And last week I had an opportunity to go to ASEP-C and teach Corps and Division incoming commanding officers. And one of the things that I've never heard before that we are starting to hear more of, because we have what we consider to be recidivist senior officers going through war fighters and major training exercises, is I want more AMSOs. They are powerful, okay? I want to know what you're doing at Fort Novacil that makes that warrant officer so good at his job. I want more of it. In fact, tell me how I get my S2 there. Tell me how I can get them to come down to my division headquarters and teach my division staff the tools that they have right at their fingertips that take my staff hours to figure out. So if anybody in here has a doubt at how valuable you are as an AMSO or how valuable this program is, that's the proof in the pudding. And they're not no-name people. They're people that are in command of our ADCSs for the 82nd, the 101st, all the current organizations that have been deployed in support of the recent unpleasantries. We need to get after this. And getting after it isn't complaining about it, okay? Getting after it is opening up the new .9 and digesting it to the lowest level possible, understanding at echelon how to execute it. That's what we need to get after. Is it going to be hard? Yes, it is, okay? Are we gonna learn a lot? Yes, we are. But if we continue to just watch the campfire like it's Ranger TV, we will not be successful in what we see overseas. I would tell you that this time last year when I was watching the air assault go across the river and the lake and go uphill and get shot at, I asked myself, would we be doing the same thing if that was us doing it at the same time? I think we're learning at the speed of light right now, okay? I want to congratulate my Compo 2 and my Compo 3 brothers for taking the time, delivering the assets, and going to things like MOTS. We are learning a ton, okay? And I'm going to say it again in the next exercise too. Some of you guys in the audience are Trekkies, right? What happened when the human race went to warp speed? The Vulcans showed up, gave us all the knowledge. Now our sister services, because we're going to tilt rotor craft and participating in MOTS, they're finally like, hey, welcome to the party. It's good that you guys finally caught up. We need to stay sharp, we need to stay focused and keep moving down this path. Are there any questions of me as far as AMS? Because I'm just going to point at these two subject matter experts. I mean, the last time I used AMS, it had a big disco ball in the back of the aircraft, okay? So, are there any questions?
Sure.
Come on up.
Sir, I do have questions. So directly in line with what you're talking about with the S2s and how valuable AMSOs are, I've experienced that big time when our division deployed. Our 10th Cab headquarters is currently forward in Europe. They wanted a lead AMSO. The problem is their S2 didn't know how to integrate that AMSO into the threat mission planning. So it took our AMSO about 3 months prior to the deployment to train the S2. And that sounds kind of putting the S2 down, but I'm not. They come out of school well trained. The problem is they don't understand aviation. They don't understand the threat we face. They don't understand how to put that into aviation talk for aviators. I think everybody out here has gone through the S2 brief where they're like, there's an IED over here. Who cares, man? I want to know what threat's going to kill me. So most of S2s turn over faster than AMSOs. And so most of the time, my AMSO at the brigade is constantly retraining the new lieutenant or the new captain at the battalion, at the brigade level. My question is there an initiative to push into the Intelligence Center of Excellence and start teaching at even a course or even some information so that with their S2 graduates and it comes from Fort Huachuca to a unit, to a cab, they understand at least the introduction to Army aviation and how to use an AMSO, what an AMSO even is.
Fantastic question, by the way.
Great question. So my name's Dave Spillman. I work at Intelligence and Security Command. I'm the Chief Standards Officer there. I am not a survivability officer, but I love survivability, right? So I have 17 MSCs under my headquarters, all Intel, right? So if you want AMSO stuff with ICO for MI professionals, they go through a CTSSB process too. It takes 36 months to get it put in their curriculum, right? So Aviation Center of Excellence needs to communicate that up through TRADOC back to ICO. It can happen. We have seen great success by sending our 35 series folks to this course. Awesome success, right? I have 2 MI brigades that operate aerial intelligence. Every single one of my S2s, clear down to the company level, have been to this course or have monitored this course, which brings great capacity to, I have MI commanders, I don't have aviators. I wish I had aviators, but I got MI commanders, right? So it's a huge building block, and the cabs can get right on board with it, right? You got to use this guy, USAACE, to make it happen.
So I'm glad you brought that up, and part of what we want to talk about is give some expectation management on the help us help you kind of where we go from this. So we've had conversations with ICO. We recently had one in reviewing the latest 2-0 and talking to them about fuse mission planning and how we look at IPB and how AMSOs become a part of that process, and trying to get that spread into larger doctrine outside of just the .9. But ICO came back to us and said the portion of intelligence officers that support aviation is so small, they saw it as an aviation problem. That drove us over to the regiment really to work with our regiment partners in trying to create what was hoped to be an ASI producing course for intelligence support to rotary wing. It ended up not going that way because of foundry funds and how foundry funds work and some of the complications with getting officers MTO'd properly and sent to these schools. But the regiment did set up an amazing course to send S2s there and to educate them on aviation stuff. And what you'll see in the new .9 are two things. One, talking about fuse mission planning as it relates to MDMP and IPB. So we aren't trying to create a new process or have you learn something new. We're trying to teach our AMSOs where to plug in, what the right time is, and what the right things a commander needs to make decisions, as well as in the back in a career progression model to say, here are some of the other courses, and not just giving you a smattering of, here's every course out in joint land that you can go to that's nice, but here's a very specific per your rank, per where you're at the platoon, company, battalion, brigade level of courses that we think directly correlate to what you need to do for your commander. And the intelligence support to rotary wing that 160th puts on is one of those courses we put in there to send AMSOs to and to get your S2s. But you're absolutely right. That relationship there in training them is a valid one. We'll continue to work, but this is where we need to hear from you. So things like EABE, as we're trying to push it, understand when we say a year, that's what we would like. EABE's not going. You're not going to see EABE on your aircraft in a year, just like we're not going to solve this in a year. But when you in the force push this up through your commanders, and they say, "Why don't I have this capability when it exists?" People stop and listen. We've been trying to fix simulations in the UH-60 Mike Bat for a while. It took 3 memos signed by cab commanders, and a week later, utility was down at Fort Novacell with a blank check in hand going, what do you need to fix this problem for these 3 cab commanders? Now, that's not to say, again, we weren't ignorant to the fact we had been trying to solve that, but when you guys say it makes a difference. So that's why we do these things of the fuse and the syncs and bringing everybody together so we can kind of highlight the path forward, and you can help us correct with that, and we can give you those right avenues to take your frustrations and filter them into the correct processes to get it done. Okay.
So we also put in the doctrine it's called the STAT, the Strategy Tactics Analysis Team. We kind of stole it from the 160th for their ADAPT. We just didn't want to use the same name, so copyright issues. But that is your core. Your core team is going to be that AMSO, that S2, that EW officer at the appropriate level, and your SP to ensure that there is checks and balances when it comes to monitoring the threat and finding the best course of action for the commander as they move forward.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that you can help us with, and this is something the Army is struggling with as we modernize. Okay, everybody comes to me and says, I don't have the time to do just about everything. We need you to write about your successes and your failures. We need you to give us a white paper that says, hey boss, I want to bring S2s into the AMSO program, or I want to take the AMSO program maybe to ICO and teach it there, okay? So we need your feedback, all right? It's me, it's Casey, it's Chris, it's Julie McKnight that are the voice of DOTD around the planet. It's 4 people. If all of you were to write something, you are force multiplying something for me. And I'm not talking a book. I'm talking a point paper, A, B, C, D, execute. The boss signs it. It goes with him to the next ASEP-C. He sits right next to the ICO commander. They have a discussion. Boom. Bob's your uncle, right? It's literally that easy. All right, in the back of all of our FMs, if you want to make changes, how do you make changes? CTSSBs. CTSSBs. Send your best there. When you don't send your best there, we have examples of removing launchers out of UAS platforms. We have examples of taking tools out of things. Send us your best and your brightest amongst everything else we need you to do. Okay? Bottom line up front, it's not going to be easy. It isn't going to be cheap. Cheap, fast, and easy, right? You get two. We're not going to work that way. Okay? I need you to get after it. Get after it. And we need to get the next generation ready, because the next thing we talk about is tactics. Not only do I have to worry about a new fleet, that this is what this is all about right now, but I also have to maintain the AMS requirements for an aging fleet. And oh, by the way, how much of our aging fleet fought in the first Gulf War? Okay? Hueys, Cobras, 58s, Sky Cranes, Chinook, Charlie models and Alpha models, Mohawks, Sherpas, you name it. It was fighting right alongside AH-64s. In my vision, that's what the next fight's going to look like. It's going to be a mixed bag of tricks. So not only do I have to do PME and POI for all that, I have to do PME and POI for all the new stuff as well. So, like I said, it's not easy. Get after it, okay? And give me some feedback. Hua? Chris, you got anything else? Or Case, you got anything else?
Just one of the caveats we took out of the .9 is a reduction in academic requirements, trying to lessen the burden on the field. If you fall in any of the scenarios for any of our near-peer competitors, there's not going to be a train-up. It's lottie-dottie, everybody. So you're either, well, take MacArthur's words, you're not ready. So you need to get ready. If it's not a requirement, make it a personal requirement. All right, thank you.
And we wanted to give a few minutes to CW5 Travis Haney. If you don't know, the Army AMSO up at Demo AV, real key component, both he and Justin at the G8, making a lot of the things that you want to come to fruition. So Travis, I'll hand it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Chris. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware. Last week, I believe it was, or the Friday just before that, STACOM 2301 was released. And I think it was released to the senior level leadership, and it didn't quite filter its way down. So thanks DES and Survivability Branch for pushing it down out to all those units. Obviously, we're not going to discuss it in here based off of its content. But what I want to do is talk about a few key fundamentals. So I'm glad you brought that up already, Casey, is fundamentals. So all of our training, it doesn't matter what we do, we have to follow basic fundamentals before we can progress onto a more advanced level type of training. All right, so make sure that when you are out there doing any training whatsoever, you're identifying what all your highest risks are and then how you're going to mitigate those risks. We had a little bit of discussion earlier today at lunch and kind of identifying at what level does that risk need to be reduced to. If you put me back in a helicopter, you better put all the risk mitigation levels in the world, because I haven't touched one, in 3 years. But your traditional W4, W5, they're probably pretty senior, and they can probably do a lot more than your W1s. So it's important to be able to understand and identify that anytime you go out and do any of your training. And that builds into proficiency as well. But one other thing I do want to talk about is EAB, and hopefully getting this out a little bit faster. Units constantly ask me, hey, can I get some ASC so I can go do training? Unfortunately, no. We cannot give you ASC to go do training because we are divesting all the APR39 alpha processors. They're old and obsolete. We only have so many Charlie processors in the Army inventory, and we currently have about 23 of 72 Apaches modernized with a Delta processor. So we 100% want to try and get you this stuff to go do training, but unfortunately we do not have the systems to give you. So, but I appreciate it. Always feel free to reach out to us, and we'll see if we can do something one way or the other. But thanks, Chris.
Hey, Travis, for the FVL fleet, do you see ASC still being centrally managed?
So I will say, with our procurement objective of ASC, it's always going to be centrally managed. Ideally, it would be a part of that system and built there. But as far as what we're going to purchase to put on these aircraft, we don't ever really see putting 100% of our fleet in the fight at the single time. So we have to balance. I think it's talked a little bit this morning. If you sat in this morning's sessions, when General Peterson was talking budget and balance, we have to balance we know we need it, right? But we just can't need it for the entire force. So we got to find that balance so we can at least get what we need purchased to reach our objectives of what we see our threat is going to be or what that next fight is going to be.
Any other questions from the audience?
All right. Thank you for coming. Again, Chris is going to be the new man on the blame line here as of tomorrow morning. So congratulations.
Thank you.